Her hotline is Matt Harmon, receptionperception.com. Always a thrill to have Matt on the show. I mean, one of the most well-respected guys in the game. I know I can say that safely. Matt, Mike, and Chris here. Thanks for being back on with us.
Always good to be with you guys. Honestly, I was enjoying your conversation much more than whatever I'm about to say. I mean, that was you guys had me captivated there, so I think I'm just about to bring down the vibe at this point.
I doubt that. Riveting. I know, it was riveting. Sure it was. Well, generally, Matt, receivers this year, consensus is very different than it sounded for the last couple of years, if not, say, the last 5. There have been amazing players to come out of the draft at that position. This year, it's different. I mean, you're charting these guys and as far in on it as anybody. Is that how it sounds to you, A, and B, is it accurate?
Yeah, no question. That is kind of how I feel as well. I mean, I think there are some quality players this year. Like, there's no doubt about it. Actually, the farther I get down into kind of the guys that I think are going to go on day 2, I think there's a lot of nice potential dart throws. Now, I think that's obviously a different selling point than what we've had the last few years. I mean, it just straight up, you're not going to find 3 guys that I think should go in the top 10 picks. I think you're only going to find one guy that guy might play cornerback, who should be a top 10 receiver in this year's class. So it's not the group that we had last year when we had Marvin Harrison, we had Malik Neighbors, and we had Rome Odunze. And honestly, like Odunze and Harrison, I think those guys were, situations are situations, but they were pretty much outproduced and outplayed by guys like Brian Thomas Jr. and Ladd McConkey. I don't know that we're going to have a group like that this year, but I do think there's a lot of interesting quality pieces on day 2, day 3. So if you're a team that's looking to fill out your wide receiver room, I think this is a reasonably decent class to look for number 2s and number 3s. I just don't think you're going to have a lot of guys that I would grade in as, they're ready-made to come in and contribute and start, and by the end of the rookie seasons be number 1 wide receiver.
What do you think Hunter should be in the NFL? Recognizing that he probably will dabble on both sides, but there's some risks that come with that. Chief among them, injury. If you're going to play, 1.5 times as much as the average receiver or corner, then you're on the field that much more, and who knows. But should he be someone who focuses on receiver, in your opinion, Matt?
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of what he will be, since I started charting Travis Hunter, and for full disclosure, I don't watch college football during the season. I'm sure I've said that over the course of my time coming on the show with you guys, because as I always say, the NFL keeps me busy enough, and I'm trying to remain a happily married man. I think it would be a pretty tough sell if I said to, Mrs. Harmon, hey, we're going to blow a whole nother day on football, one that doesn't have anything to do with my job. So I don't watch college football during the season. So, I mean, I knew who Travis Hunter was, obviously. I'm not that unplugged from the situation. I knew he was a two-way player, obviously a Heisman Trophy winner, very celebrated collegiate player. But going into charting him, I didn't really know what to expect as a wide receiver. And even you just do the base research on it. Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, made a really good point at the owners meeting, I think it was this week, where he said, people try to compare him to previous two-way players he threw out Champ Bailey. And look, Champ Bailey, I grew up watching him with the Washington football team. I mean, he was an incredible player. He was a two-way player in college. He had 775 yards was his most yardage gained as a pass catcher at the collegiate level. Travis Hunter was 5th in the FBS this year. The production is just different. I went into it saying okay, maybe there's going to be some snaps of him playing wide receiver, whatever. No, the guy's a full-time wide receiver. He's playing over 100 snaps in 11 of 13 games, 100 total snaps in 11 of 13 games in college football last year. That is crazy stuff. So you look at him as a wide receiver, whether he's going to be able to do both or not. I mean, number one, we've just never seen somebody do it at this level to this degree already. So is he going to have to be an outlier to do that in the NFL? Yeah, he's already an outlier, man. He's already proven to be somebody to buck the trend. So he would have to buck another trend, obviously, to do that in the NFL, but I think that is what he's going to attempt to do. I think it's what he's going to want to do. By all accounts, that is what he's hoping to do. So, far be it for me to tell another man what to do with his career. But I will say this. If he chooses to play wide receiver, He's an incredible wideout. 97th percentile success rate versus zone, 97th percentile success rate versus press and reception perception. Full green route tree, wins at every route on the tree, so you can do, honestly, more with him than what Colorado did last year, because I think a lot of what they were doing was in an attempt to preserve his body. Like you said, physically, that's the hardest part of this. He also, in addition to the separation, he has truly rare catching ability, great hands, great ball skills. He tracks the ball like a corner at the catch point. So incredibly smart, instinctive, rare athlete that if he chose to focus on wide receiver, my comparison for him is like prime Odell Beckham. That's who he reminds me of. I think he obviously, if he chose to play wide receiver, he'd instantly be one of those like tier 1 prospects in the NFL draft.
I mean, some people thought Odell Beckham was good. So there's at least some hope for this kid. Matt Harmon, that didn't mean anything, with us on the West Her Hotline, Mike Schopp and the Bulldog here. You know, there are some names where maybe the Bills would be inclined, probably not in the first round. But before we attack a couple of those guys, Matt, let's set the Bills up. You mentioned last year's class. It's 9 of the first 34 picks are wide receivers last year, including Keon Coleman, who was 8th on that list, McConkey 9th. I do want to mention Jaden Higgins in the course of this question, because I think I saw you tweet a comparison maybe between Higgins and Coleman. I mean, how do you think it went? I think yourself and a lot of people were saying, like, fine maybe if he's a slot receiver, but that didn't really happen, and you had just sort of a mid-rookie season here from Coleman.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would describe it. It was a mid-rookie season, not bad. I don't think he's a bad player, and it's funny when you talk about draft prospects and you say, hey, I think he would be best maximized in the slot. That doesn't mean I think he's going to be useless as an outside receiver. I just think, again, if you're going to try to get a guy like that to be a high-volume player, you're going to make him the most efficient producer as possible. I do think a move to that kind of jumbo slot receiver. And I mean, we're talking about big slot. Like, Cooper Kupp's a big slot receiver. Chris Godwin's a big slot receiver. Keon Coleman, I was talking about this with James Coe today. I mean, he'd be like a big-ass slot receiver. Like, he's a big slot. Same with Jaden Higgins, who I do think is very comparable to that Keon Coleman profile. Another guy that was probably, he was used as an X receiver in college. I think would be best maximized as a slot, or, and this is where I think the Bills can start to kind of maybe expand, if Coleman is up to it, expand his deployment, because like Keon Coleman's got Khalil Shakir in his receiver room. Khalil Shakir is going to be their primary slot. He should be. He's a great player that they paid. I love Shakir's game, but you can do things where those guys are working in tandem, in stacks and bunches, where Coleman is an outside receiver, quote unquote, but he's off the line of scrimmage. You're still getting him away from press coverage. You're putting defenders in conflict in the terms of like playing tight press man coverage on him. I just thought last year it was pretty much very basic straight line X receiver stuff, which he can make some plays because he's a ball winner. But I think in terms of getting him open and more efficient targets, I think there's some ways they can continue to expand his deployment. And like you mentioned, I think Jaden Higgins, a lot of the same feeling with him as a prospect.
So what sort of player should the Bills, like looking at their receiving core here, had to remind us that Curtis Samuel is still on the team. He had a very weird year. It seemed like he was injured maybe and hindered for 3/4 of the year, and then sort of found a little bit of his game, I think, as the year went on, Matt, but still kind of an unfulfilling season. But he's here, Coleman's here, Shakir's here. They've added Josh Palmer. We'll certainly want your thoughts on him as a player moving forward, but they really haven't replaced Amari Cooper, unless you think Palmer is replacing Cooper, in which case then they haven't replaced Matt Collins. Like, they're down a body from last year, and I wonder if there's a skill set out there in the draft that they should be looking for.
Yeah, I wonder where they're at with Curtis Samuel, because, by all accounts, he was having a great camp and a good offseason, and then obviously this is just, unfortunately, as a Curtis Samuel guy, this is the classic Curtis Samuel story, as he just picks up an untimely injury after another untimely injury, and then he just doesn't get full. This is exactly what happened when he signed with Washington. Honestly, in the first offseason there, he dealt with some injuries, and it just was, like you said, perfectly said it. It was an unfulfilling first season in Washington. Similar in Buffalo, he picks up these injuries close to when camp's about to kind of close, and preseason's coming to an end, and just never really truly gets in phase with the offense, and kind of was very gadgety in his usage. I'm wondering if they want more from him. We'll see about that. The Josh Palmer signing, to me, that seems like a Matt Collins replacement, or maybe like in their view, a younger, more maybe perhaps explosive version of Matt Collins. I think Josh Palmer is a nice dirty work player. I think he runs some pretty good routes. Like, is he a true full field separator? I don't know about that. I'm not quite as high on Palmer as maybe some other services that chart separation and things of that nature. But I do think he's a useful. I'm going to say this about a lot of these Bills receivers: useful players that have their roles. They're just kind of very narrowly defined, I guess, in terms of how they're deployed and should be used. So when you're thinking about the Bills receiver room going forward, I still think they need. Or they could, let me put it this way, I don't think they need, but they could use one more guy that can really beat man coverage on the outside. Is that Curtis Samuel? Like, I think that in Samuel's best years, he has been a guy that you could play at flanker and you could use off the line of scrimmage and move him around and have him beat man coverage. But I just wonder where they're at with him. So if you're looking into the draft, there are some guys that I think will go on day 2 that sort of fit that more vertical X receiver bucket that I think they should still be shopping in. I'm thinking about Trey Harris from Ole Miss, who's probably more of like a developmental guy because he's coming from a goofy collegiate offense. He's got a little bit more of a stripped down route tree. But man, there are times where he stacks defenders really well on go routes, and he can kind of be that man coverage presence that they're missing right now. A little bit further down the line, Alec Manor out of Stanford is another guy who very mistake-prone at the catch point, to put it nicely. He's got issues in contested situations, but does show you flashes of being a man coverage player and is a pretty good blocker as well, which, in a run-heavy offense like Buffalo's, they probably value. So there's definitely some guys for them if you go further down the board in that X-receiver bucket, but players like Jalen Knoll, who, is probably a vertical slot player. It seems like they're kind of overloaded with slot players right now, but he would really bring some of that speed and verticality that I think they're missing right now.
Very good. Matt Harmon, our guest here on WGR. How many receivers would you guess go in round 1? I've seen 4 or 5. I've seen a mock draft with 1, not including Hunter. I'm sorry, not including Hunter.
Not including Hunter.
Yeah, it'd be 2 at the minimum, right? The very minimum, if you do include Hunter. How many do you think deserve it or will go in round 1?
I think the over/under should be set at 2.5. If we're not including Travis Hunter, because I think that Matthew Golden and Tetro McMillan are locks. I think they will go in the first round. I would be surprised if either of them slipped out of the first round. The guys that are kind of in that orbit afterwards are Emeka Egbuka and Luther Burden. Now, for me, I rank Egbuka ahead of Matthew Golden, but I think the NFL is a little higher on number one, just his ability to run. Obviously, we saw the 40, and he really does have like vertical route chops. But I just think he's kind of capped out. I think both these guys are number 2 receivers, Egbuka and Golden. But Egbuka is just so quarterback friendly. He's a dirty work guy. He gets open against zone coverage. Both these guys get open against zone coverage. But Egbuka, I think, it gives you a little bit more reliability as a catcher. He gives you more reliability in terms of that separation underneath, whereas Matthew Golden's more that vertical player. So I just think that Egbuka's a little quarterback friendly, but a little quarterback friendlier than Golden is. But he's a guy that I rank ahead of him. But I could see him slipping to the second round just because not everybody loves the power slot receiver profile like I do. And Luther Burden, man, he is the ultimate grade to the flashes player. If you're grading to the flashes, which is obviously not what I do with reception perception, I'm charting all the routes that they run in the sample of games that I take. Mm-hmm. That sort of shows, kind of a mixed product. But the flashes of his are, I think you can see some like Bud Light Malik Neighbors in his game because he's a slot-only player, people forget Malik Neighbors was like a 50-50 slot outside guy at LSU. He beats man coverage. He's awesome after the catch, but there's some lapses in his game, no question about it. There's some, there's questions about the character too. That stuff is out there with Luther Burden as well, which he's gonna. It's been told to me, he's gonna lose every single tie against Egbuka and Golden, who are just all high character guys. So I don't know if Burden ends up going the first round. Right now, I think I tend to doubt it, although I wouldn't be surprised because he's very talented. So I think Golden and Tet are locks, and then Egbuka, I think, should personally go in the first round. I don't know if the NFL agrees with me.
Have you gotten around to doing work on Isaiah Bond yet? We've heard this week that he was visiting the Bills, so kind of curious, and I'll bet Bills fans are curious to hear your opinion on him.
Yeah, baby, there's another lid lifter, right? And that is a speed guy. And I think when you look at this Bills receiver room, for me, I do think, like, they need an outside. I think they need more outside receivers so that they can move Keon Coleman around. That's basically what they wanted Amari Cooper to be. There was a moment there when Cooper first got to the Bills, and they were able to kind of move Coleman a little bit more around from that X receiver position. I was like, this is going to work. It just obviously did not sustain itself for a variety of reasons with Amari Cooper. So I'd love to see somebody like that. But again, I think beyond just an outside presence, I think what they need is some speed. And Isaiah Bond brings speed. I think he's probably like a day 2 receiver to me. I'm not that excited about Isaiah Bond. I think he's a limited application player. He's also another guy that there's some character questions and things of that nature. So I really don't have a good sense of his draft range and where he is going to go. I think he's probably like a day 2 talent because he can give you speed and he can give you some separation ability. I just wonder where he ends up going in the draft. But again, if we're thinking about speed and like verticality, man, I think Jalen Noel would look good in a Buffalo Bills uniform, but that's just kind of like one of my guys this year.
Matt, just a couple more minutes if you have it. My guys on ADP chasing are often bringing up the name Jack Bech. It seems like there might be 2 kinds of people in the world, Jack Bech guys and everybody else, because I hear a lot about him, just kind of the hype. Are you in on him?
There's Jack Bech guys, and then there's losers, and I'm not going to be among the losers. I like Jack Bech a lot. No, man, this guy, he's just a good football player. Straight up, what's the ceiling on him? I'm not sure about that, but he looks like a guy that would be a great fit in one of these Rams offenses. Tough physical player, can play out of multiple alignments. Good route runner, gets open, tough. I really like his game, man. He's a fun player that I think lands in the right spot, and we could see him just get pummeled with volume. He's definitely somebody that I think can play outside. He played outside a lot at TCU, and I thought has some real man coverage ability. His profile, when it goes live on the site, it's probably not going to be in this next drop, but maybe the one the week after that. People are going to like what they see. I really think he's a good player that I don't know where. Again, another player I struggle to see where he's going to go, but just because honestly, in this draft class, the only thing I will fight people on is that Travis Hunter is the best receiver in the class. Everything else I think is kind of up for debate. I'm not going to go hard in the paint for any of these guys because I think it's what skill set do you like? When it comes down to teams, who else is in your room? So for that reason, guys like Jack Bech, I'm not quite sure where he's going to go in the draft. Just holistically, as somebody that doesn't have to fill out a wide receiver room, I think he should be a second-round pick. I'm a big fan.
All right. I can buy all that. I'm just if I hear one more time how he led 2021 LSU in catches with Neighbors on the team and Brian Thomas on the team.
We don't need to hear that. We don't need to hear that anymore. But
got it.
People are going to keep saying it.
It's interesting.
It's an interesting piece of trivia the first time you hear it. But I'm with you, Mike. That I've heard it about 10 times now. I know. And I by the way, I've probably said it like 3 of those 10 times that I've heard it. So
yeah, well, it's pretty good.
It's a win for me because I hadn't heard that. So This is why you keep repeating things, because you're always going to find someone who's going to go, hey, that was news to me.
All right, so watch out if you're hanging around with Bulldog in the coming weeks.
I'm going to be dropping that everywhere now, right?
Here it comes.
Matt, just for old time's sake, just we're 20 minutes into a conversation here, and we've not mentioned Stefon Diggs for obvious reasons. But that's when we first got to know you. I feel like certainly that's the case for me. I think for Mike as well. When the Bills traded for Diggs back in 2020, what do you think of him signing in New England?
I like it for old time's sake, and he's still in the division, so you guys will still have to think about him. Man, I really like the signing for New England. Number one, let's just get this out of the way. The weeping and gnashing of teeth about what he was paid. Who cares? New England has more money than they can possibly spend right now from a cap space perspective. Well, who are they missing out on by paying Stefon Diggs? Maybe they overpaid him, whatever. It's not my money. As my buddy Patrick Claybon from the NFL Network said to me on my show, they're not going to donate it to a children's hospital, so what do I care about what they're paying him? I think that's a good way of looking at it. So, number one, I don't really care about what they paid him, and honestly, it's just they needed somebody in that room. And what I think is the most interesting thing about Diggs right now is that, you guys know this, and we talked about it last year. He definitely was a declining player in his final year in Buffalo. We saw that step down. But when we're talking about Stefon Diggs, as you guys know, and as we talked about all these years, we're talking about one of the best performers in the reception perception era from a success rate versus man, press, zone coverage perspective. So the decline is still like, yeah, it's a step down, but it's still very much like a starting level receiver. And what I thought was interesting about him last year in Houston, he took more snaps in the slot than he had since his second season with the Minnesota Vikings. In my opinion, I think most of that was because of who the other guys were in the room, like we're saying with all these prospects. They have a true X receiver in Nico Collins and a vertical flanker in Tank Dell. You needed a slot receiver. Diggs was able to do that. I don't think he has to do that for the Patriots. 67th percentile success rate versus man coverage last year in reception perception with the Houston Texans for Stefon Diggs. Obviously, there's an injury question. What's he going to look like coming back from it? But I think the film last year, whether that's still relevant or not, again, coming off a torn ACL, did show that he can still play outside as a flanker and beat some man coverage.
Matt, thank you so much for today. ReceptionPerception.com. It seems that the site is just doing great. The videos are great. You're connected with players, so lots of like from Matt's content. Anything else I should mention?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's almost like we've been doing this for a while now, Mike. And I appreciate
Yes.
you guys as always having me on. And yeah, the Bills always give us something to talk about from the wide receiver perspective. So I'm really interested to see how this room fills out this year.
Me too. Thanks again, Matt.
Always appreciate you guys. Thank you.